Welcome back to Deadline Day, everybody, and the Ornstein bomb has been dropped. Enzo Fernandez has been granted permission to undertake a medical with Chelsea. He'll be undertaking that medical in Lisbon. It looks like this move is finally going to happen, but it isn't going to be cheap, is it, Michael?
No. I think everyone watching this will know that by now, to be honest. This price tag, this release clause, has been, very well known for a while now. 120 million euros, possibly. Some other reports also saying 130 million over the last few weeks. So either way, it would be a British transfer record that would usurp the Jack Grealish 100 million pound deal to Man City. This would come in at 105 million pounds, after exchange, and that would take Chelsea's spending this season to 610 million euros and 500,000 on top of that as well.
James Bond.
It's pretty crazy. The money surrounding Chelsea transfers this year has been pretty mad in general, hasn't it? We already saw that Mudryk deal, huge overpayment on him. But at the same time, Enzo Fernandez is one of the star boys of world football at this moment in time. In terms of European clubs or mainland European clubs selling to Premier League clubs, it's not even that shocking anymore, is it? Let's face it. I know he only moved to Benfica from River Plate last year for just 10 million plus add-ons, but he is already valued at 55 million by Transfermarkt. Benfica are having a huge season, aren't they? They got Club Brugge in the Champions League last 16 in a tie that they expect to win. So they've got a potential Champions League quarter-final. They're also in the quarter-finals against Braga in the Cup. So they're fighting on three fronts. Plus, there's that World Cup tax, isn't there? Won the World Cup with Argentina, was one of the best players at the tournament, won that award. And Benfica are known for selling at high prices, aren't they? Nunez for 80 million euros to Liverpool last summer. Joao Felix, of course, for 127 million euros, which might not even be topped by this. And that was back in 2019 as well. But at the same time, he's only made 17 appearances for Benfica this term. So once again, is Chelsea under Todd Boehly, really banking a lot on one player to be the future of this midfield. And it is a potentially exciting future because Enzo Fernandez does look like a star in the making. He's got 6 assists from the base of midfield for Benfica this term. I know he's playing in a very ball-dominant side, but he's creating around 2 chances per game. He's also making, doing a lot of defensive work, 3.6 tackles and interceptions in a side that is keeping more possession than even Man City this term. And I think, if you take the money out of it for a second, I know it's significant, but the fact that they're getting a decent fee for Jorginho, who's got 6 months left on his deal, and getting in someone who I think in almost every single area is a significant upgrade on Jorginho, I think it's only good news for the future of that midfield.
Yeah, the money is one thing, but the player is another, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'll pick up where McCubbin left off, and we can talk about the composition of Benfica's midfield, where he's played this season and how he's played, to give the guys at home a clear indication of where he might slot into this Chelsea side, because that is a pretty interesting scenario as it is. He's played in a double pivot this season with Florentino Luis for Benfica, and their dynamic pretty interesting. Luis does the majority of the defending, Enzo does the majority of the ball progression, and they do interchange. But there's a definite emphasis, I would say, on joining the attack when it comes to Enzo Fernandez. For example, he's averaging almost 100 passes per 90 this season in the Liga NOS, so clearly important to build up, but completing almost 10 progressive passes per 90, which is almost double Jorginho's Premier League output this season. So a lot of forward thrust to his game, which he demonstrated at the World Cup as well, has the physicality to partake in multiple phases of play, which is not something we can say for a lot of Chelsea's midfield, it must be said. Like McCubbin said, been a creative tour de force this season, despite picking the ball up from deep an awful lot. 5 assists in league play as joint first in the squad with Alex Grimaldo. Also chipping in with 2 shots per 90, worth flagging that the majority of them do come from outside the box. So likes a speculative long-range pile driver, which I imagine Potter will probably coach out of him. But Jorginho currently chipping in with 0.3 shots per 90. And I know it's not necessarily tick for tack. Obviously, I'm weighing them against one another because one player is coming in, one player is going out. But I would say perhaps not as defensively secure as Jorginho. You know, Jorginho is an underrated reader of the game, which you can see in the amount of interceptions he's historically clocked up. But yeah, is just physically so much more capable. It'd be silly to think he doesn't make a significant impact straight away, I think, in that Chelsea midfield. But one thing I wanted to ask you guys was, I mean, if Kante is fit, and we're led to believe he's coming back into the fold, a huge if with him these days, but if he is, he goes back into the side, doesn't he, as one of their world-class components. Chelsea haven't really had a set formation this season, but if they do move to that 4-3-3, who do you think misses out, you know, across that starting 11?
I think Enzo's definitely got to start at 105 million pounds.
Obviously,
has to start. I think in an ideal world, it will be Kovacic alongside him, because I don't
quite similar as players.
I just don't think Kante's going to be fit. If Kante was fit and everything went perfectly, then you would see a Kante and Enzo central midfield pairing. I just don't think you're going to see it enough across the course of the second half of the season. I also don't think you should discount Zakaria, who was actually playing really, really well prior to the injury against Fulham and looked like he'd worked his way back into favour under Graham Potter after being this sort of forgotten man at the start of the season. And I have to say, I think Mason Mount might be in a little bit of a trouble here. He's not had his best season. They've brought in some really exciting young players in this window. The average age of transfers into the side in the January window is just 20. And with João Felix wanting to play in that sort of role, Mudryk playing off the left potentially as well, Havertz is going to want to play in there too. I think Mason Mount could suffer at the hands of Enzo Fernandez. And you know what? I don't think he's been good enough to demand a starting place in that midfield this season. If it was Mason Mount of last season, 18 months ago, I would say yes. But I think Mason Mount's minutes might suffer under Enzo Fernandez's arrival.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Mudryk's arrival signalled, you know, potentially the end of Mason Mount as in the left, you know, on the left of that three-pronged attack. So I do think he needs to step up. But equally, you could imagine maybe a midfield three of Enzo at the base, Kovacic on the right, and maybe Mount's just brought back into a midfield three rather than in the attack. So I think it gives Graham Potter a lot of options. That, you know, that goes without saying. But also, you know, a player like Carney Chukwuemeka, who I think has looked quite you know, interesting, you know, in limited minutes so far this season. You know, clearly a huge talent as well. You know, it would be a shame if this were to see him suffer in that sense, because I think, you know, he is a player who I think also represents the future of Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many young players arriving at this club. You'd have to say Enzo Fernandez. The one thing I will say about this is that whether they sign him now or whether they signed him in the summer, I think he would still have cost 120 million euros. I don't think if they'd have come to the summer, they'd have suddenly gone, do you know what, we'll accept less than that release clause. He's on a 5-year contract. And I think they would have had just as much, if not more, competition in the summer from the likes of Man City, potentially Real Madrid, potentially Liverpool. But to get him now, they can still use the amortisation process, because that hasn't been brought into effect yet by FIFA, has it either. You know, it's not. I think it is smart business. I know it's a massive overpayment, but I think it is smart business.
It is, but I think we were all surprised at Newcastle's willingness, allegedly, to put up a £45 million bid for Conor Gallagher. All of a sudden, if you're paying £50 million and Conor Gallagher, effectively, to bring in Enzo Fernandez, it starts to look a lot more reasonable, doesn't it? Mason Mount, that's the interesting one, right? Because contract talks have broke down. There has been murmurs that Liverpool have been monitoring the situation, which would be an awesome sort of like last hour scenario if they all of a sudden entered the fray, looking to add a bit of physicality to their midfield. But yeah, I think we're going to see big players ride the bench at Chelsea this season, and there's going to be some movers and shakers in the summer. But
it puts pressure on Potter, though.
They're all on good money, aren't they? Apart from Mount and Gallagher, they're probably the chess pieces they can move fairly quickly without a great amount of effort. Of course, Ziyech might be going to PSG as well. I don't know if that the current status of that situation. But apart from that, yeah, there's people on big money that are going to be difficult to move.
Yeah, I think it puts big pressure on Potter to perform as well, because he's got so many star players and young players that want game time, need minutes, that he has to somehow find a balance.
The juggler.
Playing people, but then not leaving people on the bench, but then also finding momentum and form, because it can't be a write-off season. They can't spend £600 million across 2 windows and say, we're happy to finish 7th. That cannot happen. It has to be a concerted effort to get into this top 4. It's not beyond them. I think they're, 10 points off with a game in hand, something like that, in that sort of region. They have to be pushing for the top 4, and that, as well as the minutes for young players, makes Potter's job incredibly difficult across the second half of the season.
Well, I do think they'll factor that into their expectations, and clearly, it's not. I don't think this is akin to when Lampard was entrusted with 225 million, and it was almost like, okay, prove to us that you can go to the next level as a manager if we give you next level players. This is clearly a longer term play, and I'm sure that there'll be a buffer. They'll give him some bandwidth because of the human factor here. Like, that is going to be that dressing room feels like it could be on the cusp of implosion if players aren't moved on, right? Because as you flagged, there's going to be some unhappy souls at Stamford Bridge.
Absolutely. But what do you guys at home think of the Enzo Fernandez deal? It's expected that is going to happen over the next few hours. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Make sure you stay tuned this evening as well, because we've got loads more content coming your way, including an end of deadline day live stream. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.